People think manipulation has to be aggressive. Raised voices, accusations, someone dramatically asking if you're okay, while clearly enjoying the question a little too much. That's not how it usually works. Most of the time, it sounds like one calm sentence said at the right moment, said with enough confidence to make you double-check your own memory instead of theirs. That's how it started. A normal evening, around 8:30, nothing memorable, pasta on the stove, the dishwasher still pretending it wasn't broken, Amanda on the couch, legs tucked under her, scrolling her phone with that relaxed expression people have when they're either watching something harmless or quietly rearranging reality. I handed her a bottle of water. "Thanks," she said. Then, without looking up, she added, "We agreed this would be better for us." I paused mid-sip. "Sorry, what did we agree would be better for us?" She finally looked at me. Not irritated, not defensive, just calm, centered, like I'd asked her to repeat something obvious. "This," she said, making a small vague gesture between us. "The way we've been doing things." I waited for more. There was no more, no date, no reminder, no "remember that night when." Just "we agreed," delivered with the confidence of someone stating a law of physics. I searched my memory. There was nothing there. But here's the trick. When someone sounds absolutely certain, doubt starts looking rude. So I nodded. "Right," I said. "Sure, better for us." Amanda smiled, satisfied, and went back to her phone. The conversation was over. I walked into the kitchen and stood there longer than necessary, staring at the counter, trying to figure out when my life had quietly switched to a version where agreements happened without me noticing. That night we went to bed like usual, teeth brushed, lights off, no tension. I reached out and rested my hand on her shoulder. Nothing dramatic, just a familiar, automatic gesture. She shifted away slightly, not enough to make a point of it, just enough to avoid the contact. Then she said, still facing the wall, "I appreciate you respecting the space you asked for." I froze. "The space I asked for?" I repeated. She turned her head just enough for me to see her profile. "You said you sleep better alone," she reminded me. "Remember?" No accusation, no edge, just a reminder, like she was quoting me. "I don't remember saying that," I said. Amanda nodded slowly, like she'd expected that answer. "Well, you did," she replied. "You were actually pretty clear about it. Here's the uncomfortable part. It sounded plausible. I could imagine myself saying something like that after a long day, half asleep, trying to be practical, wanting one uninterrupted night, which is exactly why I didn't argue. If I pushed back, I'd be denying my own words. If I insisted, I'd be crossing my own boundary. So instead of fighting a conversation I couldn't remember, I did the reasonable thing. I got up, grabbed a pillow, a blanket, and walked into the guest room like a man honoring an agreement he didn't remember signing. I slept badly, not dramatically, just poorly enough to notice. In the morning, Amanda was light, relaxed, almost cheerful. "So?" she asked while pouring coffee. "Did you sleep better?" "I slept," I said. She smiled. "See? That's why we agreed." There it was again. We agreed. I leaned against the counter and watched her for a moment. "Just so I'm clear," I said casually, "what exactly did I say? Like, what were my words?" She didn't hesitate. "You said you feel more rested with space," she replied. "That you want to be more disciplined about sleep. That you don't like being touched when you're trying to unwind." She took a bite of toast, completely at ease. The delivery was perfect, confident, practiced. She wasn't describing a tired comment. She was describing a mindset. "Okay," I said slowly. "Fair." "I'm proud of you," she added. "Most men don't communicate like that." That one almost made me laugh, because apparently I'd communicated myself out of my own bed without being present for the speech. Over the next few days, the rule expanded, quietly, logically. One evening, I kissed her cheek while she was cooking. She leaned away just enough to avoid it and said, I thought we were being mindful about physical boundaries. Physical boundaries, I repeated. Yes, she said. Your space. I never said you can't kiss your wife, I replied, still calm, still measured. You didn't say it like that, she said gently. You said you needed less touch, that it overwhelms you, that you want to feel more in control. There it was. My desire became a symptom. My confusion became confirmation. Right, I said. Less touch. Thank you, she said, like I'd just shown emotional maturity. By the end of the week, the guest room felt routine. No arguments, no raised voices. Just a steady adjustment to rules that were part that still makes my jaw tighten when I think about it. I started trying to remember conversations that never happened. At work, in the shower, driving home. Maybe I said it. Maybe I forgot. Maybe this is on me. At some point, I even wrote myself a note. Don't push. You asked for space. That's how it works. You don't convince someone they're wrong. You convince them they already decided. One night, I passed the hallway mirror and caught my reflection. I looked fine, calm, functional, just a man living by a set of rules he supposedly created. And I remember thinking, if I really asked for this, why does it feel like punishment? That was the first crack. Small, quiet. But once it appeared, I couldn't unsee it. By the second week, the rules had stopped feeling new. They felt established. Like they'd always been there and I was the idiot who'd only just noticed the signs on the wall. Sleep separately. Less touch. More space. Always explained the same way. Calmly. Logically. Like she was helping me follow instructions I'd written myself and then misplaced. The next edition came dressed as something harmless. Dinner. Amanda suggested we have friends over. Nothing fancy. Just her usual circle. 2 women she'd known forever. The kind who used first names only. No last names. No questions. I agreed. I didn't see the trap yet. We sat around the table with wine glasses and that relaxed, civilized tone people use when they're pretending everything is fine. Conversation drifted, work, travel, complaints about people who don't tip. At some point, Amanda casually mentioned our new dynamic. Nothing dramatic. Just a sentence tossed into the air. It's actually been good for us, she said, giving him the space he asked for. I looked up. Before I could say anything, one of her friends nodded. Yeah, she said. You were very clear about that. Very clear. I felt my brain hesitate like a browser loading the wrong page. I was? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. She smiled at me. Friendly, certain. Absolutely. You explained it really well. Amanda didn't look at me. She just sipped her wine. I scanned the table. No one was smirking. No one was joking. They all looked comfortable. Like this was old information. Another friend chimed in. Honestly, I thought it was mature of you. Most guys don't know how to articulate boundaries like that. Boundaries. Plural. I nodded slowly, because that's what you do when 3 people agree on something you can't remember. You nod, and you wonder if you're the problem. Right, I said. I guess I had a moment of clarity. They laughed softly. The good kind of laugh. Supportive. Amanda finally looked at me and smiled. See? You're not alone. Everyone heard you. You just forgot. And suddenly, arguing didn't feel like standing up for myself. It felt like making a scene at my own dinner table. After that night, the rules multiplied. Not as rules, of course, as clarifications. You asked me not to ask you too many questions, Amanda said one evening when I asked where she'd been. You said it makes you spiral. Spiral. Interesting choice of word. I don't remember saying that, I replied. She didn't miss a beat. You said you don't like feeling interrogated. Interrogated. I'd asked if traffic was bad. Okay, I said. Fair enough. Another day. I thought we agreed not to check each other's phones, she said casually when I picked hers up to move it. You said it feeds mistrust. I put the phone down. I don't remember that conversation either, I said. She sighed softly, not annoyed, disappointed. "Why do you keep doing this?" she asked. "You were the one who wanted a reset." A reset. That one stuck, because it sounded intentional, healthy, grown-up, and resets don't come with receipts. By now, every attempt to clarify turned into a violation. If I questioned a rule, I was backtracking. If I showed confusion, I was overthinking. If I expressed discomfort, I was undoing my own progress. And Amanda never raised her voice. She spoke the way therapists speak when they want you to reach the conclusion yourself. One night, I said carefully, "This feels like a lot of distance." She nodded. "I know, and I appreciate you sticking to what you asked for." There it was again. What I asked for. I stopped trying to argue details. I started choosing my words like I was crossing a minefield someone else had mapped. The intimacy conversation arrived quietly. Of course it did. We were standing in the kitchen. She was rinsing a mug. I was leaning against the counter. I reached for her hand. She didn't pull away this time. She just didn't return it. "You said intimacy distracts you from self-growth," she reminded me. I stared at her. "I said that?" She turned off the water. "You said you want to focus on yourself, on discipline, on not being ruled by impulse." Impulse, like wanting your wife. "I never said I don't want you," I said. She smiled gently. "You didn't say it like that." "Of course I didn't." I exhaled slowly. "So what exactly are we doing?" I asked. "We're giving you what you asked for," she replied. "Time, space, focus." And suddenly, my loneliness wasn't something happening to me. It was something I was responsible for. That night, lying alone in the guest room, I replayed everything. The dinner, the nodding heads, the certainty. I opened my phone and scrolled through old messages with Amanda. Normal conversations, jokes, plans, no manifesto, no boundary speech. Still, doubt crept in. Maybe it was in person. Maybe I forgot. Maybe I'm resisting my own growth. That's when I realized something was wrong. Not explosively wrong, quietly wrong. Because I wasn't being controlled with force. I was being managed with my own supposed intentions. And the scariest part? Everyone around me seemed to agree on a version of me I didn't recognize. I didn't know it yet, but the problem wasn't my memory. It was the script, and someone else was holding it. There's a strange comfort in thinking you're the problem. Not the dramatic kind of comfort. Not the, "I'm broken and everything is awful" kind. A quieter one. Because if the issue is you, your memory, your tone, your emotional regulation, then at least the world still makes sense. That's where I landed. Somewhere between the guest room and the idea that maybe I'd been unknowingly sabotaging my own marriage with boundaries I didn't remember setting. I stopped arguing entirely. Not because I agreed, because every disagreement ended the same way. Me explaining myself and Amanda calmly translating my explanation into another example of why I was confused. If I said, "That's not what I meant," she'd say, "I know. That's why we talked about clarity." If I said, "This feels distant," she'd say, "Yes, and you said distance helps you think?" If I said nothing, she'd say, "I really appreciate how committed you are to this." Committed. To what exactly was never fully specified. At some point, apologizing became automatic. Not the big apologies. The small ones. "Sorry, I didn't mean to push." "Sorry, I forgot." "Sorry, I guess I misunderstood." I was apologizing for weather patterns, for existing slightly off script. And Amanda accepted every apology with the same gentle nod, like she was logging progress in a private spreadsheet. One evening, I caught myself saying, "Sorry, I didn't mean to cross a boundary." She smiled. "It's okay, you're learning." Learning, like this was a course I'd enrolled in voluntarily. The jokes started in my head first. That's how I cope. I'd think things like, "At this rate, I'm going to need written permission to ask how her day was." Or, "I wonder which version of me she's married to." I'd like to meet him. But the humor didn't reach my face. Because I was tired. Not physically, mentally. It takes effort to constantly second-guess your own intentions, to replay conversations you can't remember and ask yourself whether you sounded selfish while you weren't present. Around that time, Amanda started staying out later. Not dramatically late, just later. A drink after work, dinner with friends, helping someone through a rough patch. All perfectly reasonable. I didn't comment, because apparently I'd promised not to monitor her movements. That phrase appeared one night when I asked, casually, "What time do you think you'll be back?" She paused, just long enough. "You said you don't want to feel controlling," she replied. Controlling, another word added to the collection. "I was just asking," I said. "I know," she replied. "I'm just reminding you of what you wanted." Right. Of course. The first time she didn't come home at all, it wasn't even a conversation. She texted around midnight, "Staying over at Lisa's. Don't wait up." That was it. No heart emoji, no explanation. I stared at the message longer than necessary, then typed, "Okay," then deleted it. Typed, "Thanks for letting me know." Deleted that too. Finally, I sent, "Got it," because got it doesn't ask questions. And questions were no longer my area of expertise. Lying in the guest room, I tried to be reasonable. She's allowed to have friends. I asked for space. This is what space looks like. That last thought bothered me, because if this was space, it felt oddly one-sided. A few days later, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I pushed back, lightly. We were sitting on opposite ends of the couch. The physical distance had become so normal, it barely registered. "I feel disconnected," I said. "I don't think this is working the way I expected." Amanda turned toward me slowly. "This is exactly what you asked for," she said. I shook my head. "I don't think I asked for this." She frowned, just slightly. "That worries me," she said. "Why?" "Because you were very clear before," she replied. "And now it sounds like you're rewriting it." Rewriting. There it was. If I disagree, I'm unreliable. If I persist, I'm rewriting history. "I'm not rewriting anything," I said. "I'm just saying how I feel." She exhaled softly. "You said you didn't want to lead with feelings," she reminded me. "You wanted logic." Logic. I almost laughed, because logic was exactly what told me something was off. That night, I opened my laptop and searched for old messages. Nothing obsessive, nothing dramatic, just curiosity. I scrolled back weeks, months, normal conversations, memes, planning groceries, complaining about traffic, no big boundary speech, no declaration of space. Which didn't prove anything, but it didn't help either. Because doubt doesn't need proof. It just needs repetition. At some point, I realized I was afraid to speak freely in my own house. Not because Amanda was threatening, because every sentence had a correct interpretation, and it wasn't mine. I'd say, "I miss you," and hear in my head, emotional dependency. I'd think, "Where were you?" and translate it to control. I was editing myself before she had to. That's when it hit me. I wasn't being silenced. I was being trained. The irony is, I didn't feel angry yet. I felt embarrassed. Embarrassed that I'd let someone explain me to myself. Embarrassed that I'd accepted a version of my own intentions I didn't recognize. And worst of all, embarrassed that a part of me still wondered if she was right. One night, standing in the bathroom brushing my teeth, I looked at myself and thought, if I really asked for all this, why does it feel like I'm slowly disappearing? That question didn't accuse her. It didn't defend me. It just sat there. And for the first time since this started, it didn't come with an immediate answer. The thing that finally broke the spell wasn't dramatic. No confrontation, no screaming, no cinematic discovery. It was administrative. I was looking for a receipt. That's it. A stupid, forgettable errand. I needed proof of purchase for something I didn't even care about, and I knew I'd taken a photo of it at some point. So I opened my phone and started scrolling back through old photos. Weeks, then months. And then I paused. Not because I found something shocking, because I didn't find something I was supposed to. According to the current version of events, there had been a conversation, a meaningful one. The kind where I supposedly laid out my boundaries, my needs, my vision for self-growth. A conversation important enough to restructure our marriage. I couldn't find a trace of it. No text before or after. No, thanks for talking tonight. No follow-up. No emotional residue. Just normal life. Photos of dinners, screenshots of jokes, a blurry picture of a parking sign I clearly thought was more important than it was. I leaned back and stared at the screen. This didn't prove anything, but it also didn't support anything. And for the first time, that bothered me more than my memory ever had. I didn't confront Amanda. That would have been pointless. I didn't accuse her. That would have made me defensive. Instead, I did something new. I checked facts, quietly, boringly, methodically. I pulled up my calendar. The week when the agreement supposedly happened, marked with a work trip, 2 late meetings, a dinner with a client. The night I allegedly delivered my boundary manifesto, I wasn't even home. That made my stomach tighten. Not because it proved she was lying, because it meant one of us was living in a completely different timeline. I kept going. Email history, message logs, notes I'd written to myself. There were plenty of notes, just not before the rules. Every reminder to respect space, every self-check about not pushing. They all appeared after Amanda started reminding me what I'd supposedly said, which meant something uncomfortable. I hadn't been documenting my boundaries. I'd been adopting them. That night, Amanda came home late again, later than usual. I didn't ask where she'd been. Instead, I asked something safer. "Hey," I said, keeping my tone casual. "Can you remind me when we had that talk? I'm trying to piece together my schedule." She paused, just for a fraction of a second, then smiled. "Why does that matter?" "No reason," I said. "I was just curious." She shrugged. "It was a while ago." "Before or after my trip?" I asked. Another pause. "Why are you getting stuck on details?" She replied gently. "You said you didn't want to obsess over specifics." There it was. I nodded. Right. Of course I had. A few days later, we had dinner with her friends again. Same table, same wine, same comfortable certainty. I waited until the conversation drifted to something neutral, then asked lightly, "Hey, random question. Do you remember when I said I wanted all that space? Like, the day?" One of them laughed. "You really don't remember?" "I remember talking," I said. "I just can't place it." "Well," she said slowly, "I thought Amanda told you." I felt something inside me settle. Not explode. Settle. The other friend frowned. "Yeah, I don't remember being there. I just remember Amanda saying you'd been really clear, about something no one had actually heard." Amanda didn't say a word. She just watched me, her expression unreadable. That night, lying in the guest room, I didn't feel angry. I felt focused, because now I wasn't questioning my memory. I was questioning the script, and the script had a flaw, one small flaw. But once you see it, you stop asking whether you forgot. You start asking who needed you to. I didn't sleep much. Not because I was upset, because for the first time in weeks, my thoughts were my own. Once you see the pattern, you stop needing proof. Proof is for arguments. Patterns are for exits. By the time this conversation happened, I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't angry either. I was calm in a way that makes people nervous, because calm means you're no longer asking for permission to understand. It was late, quiet, no audience. Amanda was sitting at the table scrolling. I poured myself a glass of water and sat across from her. No tension, no setup. "I want to ask you something," I said. She didn't look up. "Okay. When exactly did I say I wanted all these rules?" She stopped scrolling. Not dramatically, just paused. "I don't know why you keep asking that," she replied. "We've talked about this." "I know," I said. "I'm not asking what. I'm asking when." She looked at me now. Her expression changed. Not to anger, but to concern. The kind of concern that's meant to reframe the conversation. Why does the timing matter? She asked. Because it was important, I said. It changed everything. She exhaled, slow and controlled. You're doing that thing again. I smiled slightly. What thing? Hyper-focusing, she said. You do this when you feel out of control. Interesting. I don't feel out of control, I said. I feel curious. That's not how it feels to me, she replied. My curiosity had officially become a problem. I just want a reference point, I continued. A day, a week, anything. Her jaw tightened. I don't remember dates, she said. Why are you turning this into some kind of interrogation? I asked one question. And I answered it, she snapped. You're just not accepting it. No, I said calmly. You didn't answer it. Silence. Not the awkward kind. The dangerous kind. She stood up and crossed her arms. I don't like where this is going, she said. Where is it going? I asked. Nowhere good, she replied. You're rewriting things. I tilted my head. How? You're pretending you don't remember, she said. You were very clear back then, and now you're acting like I imagined it. I nodded. So just to be clear, you remember the conversation? Yes, but not when it happened. That shouldn't matter. But it does to me. Her voice rose slightly, not loud, sharper. Why? She demanded. Why are you suddenly questioning everything? I looked at her and said the truth. Because none of it exists outside your version. She stared at me like I'd crossed an invisible line. That's a horrible thing to say, she replied. Do you hear yourself? I hear myself clearly. She shook her head. This is exactly what scares me, she said. You turn things around and make me feel like I'm lying. I didn't say you were lying. But that's what you're implying. No, I said. I'm saying something simpler. She waited. I'm saying I never chose this. Her face hardened. So now you're denying your own words? I'm asking you to show me where they exist. She laughed once, short, sharp. You're unbelievable, she said. You asked for space, you asked for boundaries, and now you're acting like I forced it on you. I'm acting like I don't remember it, I replied. Because I don't. She took a step back. I don't feel safe having this conversation, she said. There it was, the final card, safe. As if I were yelling, as if I were threatening. I nodded. Okay, I said. That's when she looked confused. Not relieved, confused. Because I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I didn't chase the narrative. I just stopped. She went to bed alone that night. I stayed at the table for a while, staring at the glass of water, and I realized something important. The system only worked if I kept explaining myself, if I kept trying to remember what never happened, if I kept apologizing for forgetting a script I'd never read. The moment I asked one simple question and refused to accept feelings as evidence, the system collapsed into emotion, accusation, fear, reversal, which told me everything I needed to know. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was anxious, because I was clear. And clarity, once it arrives, doesn't negotiate. The morning after that conversation, I woke up clear, not energized, not angry. Clear in the same way you feel after a fever breaks and you realize you can finally think in full sentences again. Amanda was already awake, sitting at the table, coffee untouched. She looked at me carefully, like someone approaching an animal that might bolt. You were quiet last night, she said. I was tired, I replied. Not a lie. Just not the whole story. She studied my face, waiting for the familiar rhythm to resume. The explaining, the reassuring, the subtle guilt. It didn't. So, she said, have you thought about what you said? Yes, I replied. And I'm done talking about it. Her eyebrows pulled together slightly. That's not very fair. I almost smiled. Fairness had suddenly become important again. I'm not arguing, I said. I'm not accusing you, I'm just stepping out. Out of what? She asked. The conversation, I said. The rules, the reminders, all of it. She crossed her arms. You can't just disengage, she said. That's avoidance. I nodded. That's one interpretation. Silence stretched. She didn't like silence anymore. Silence gave me room. Over the next few days, I changed small things. I stopped correcting her when she said, "You wanted this." I stopped responding when she reframed my feelings. I stopped asking questions that required her approval to exist. I didn't argue. I didn't comply either. When she said, "You asked for space," I said, "Okay." When she said, "You're pulling away," I said, "I'm taking responsibility." She didn't know what to do with that, because the system wasn't designed for neutrality. It was designed for participation. I opened a new bank account. Quietly. I gathered documents I hadn't looked at in years. Birth certificate, passport, things you don't touch unless you're planning something real. Not revenge, logistics. Amanda noticed, of course. "What are you doing?" she asked one evening. "Organizing," I said. "For what?" "For myself." She stared at me like that answer was offensive. "You're acting cold," she said. I shrugged. "I feel accurate." That one didn't land well. The night I decided to leave wasn't special. No fight, no last straw. I was standing in the guest room, folding clothes that had lived there long enough to feel permanent, when something occurred to me. At no point in this entire process had she asked, "Why does this hurt you?" Not once. Everything had been framed as my growth, my boundaries, my needs, but never my experience. That's when I understood the final piece. This was never about what I wanted. It was about convincing me that whatever I was given was my choice. I didn't announce my departure. I packed what I needed and left a short note on the table. Not an explanation, not a letter, just a sentence. I'm stepping away from a story I didn't write. I turned off my phone for the drive, not to punish her, to hear my own thoughts without commentary. Weeks later, people asked questions. Mutual friends, distant relatives. "What happened? Did you try counseling? Was it sudden?" I kept my answers simple. "We remembered things differently," I said. And I stopped apologizing for that. Most people nodded like they understood. A few didn't. That was fine. Understanding was no longer a requirement. Here's what I learned. She simply made me look like a fool who didn't remember, while disguising her own rules as mine, with her friends backing her up. Control doesn't always come from force. Sometimes it comes from repetition, from calmly telling someone who they are until they stop checking, from reminding them of choices they never made until resistance feels impolite. If someone tells you long enough that you chose the cage, you start thanking them for locking the door. I didn't break it. I didn't shake it. I just stopped standing inside it. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. The divorce itself was boring. Paperwork, neutral voices, two people sitting across from each other like former co-workers discussing who keeps the office chair. No drama, no speeches, just signatures and a mutual agreement not to pretend this was a tragedy. It was weeks later when she finally said it. Not in court, not in front of friends, just the two of us, standing in a quiet cafe, waiting for our drinks. She looked lighter, relaxed, like someone who'd already moved on and was now reviewing the past with academic interest. "I've been thinking," she said casually. That was always how it started. "I should probably be honest with you about something." I didn't respond. I just waited. She took a breath. "I knew you wouldn't agree to those rules if I presented them directly," she said. "You'd argue, you'd debate, you'd want explanations." I nodded once. "That's usually how adults work." She ignored that. "So I framed them differently," she continued. "I thought if they felt like your idea, it would be easier. Less conflict." Easier for whom, she didn't specify. "You mean when you said I asked for them?" I said. "Yes," she replied without hesitation. "That." She said it the way someone admits to rearranging furniture without asking. "I wasn't trying to hurt you," she added quickly. I just needed things to be a certain way. And your friends? I asked. She hesitated for the first time. They were helping, she said. They knew what I was trying to do. I smiled faintly. By agreeing with a version of me that never existed? She shrugged. I wouldn't put it like that. Of course she wouldn't. I thought it was gentler, she said, compared to fighting all the time. Gentler. I let the word sit between us. So instead of conflict, I said, you rewrote me. She frowned. That sounds harsh. It sounds accurate. She looked genuinely confused by that. I didn't think you'd take it this way, she said. You seemed fine with it. You went along. I met her eyes, because you convinced me it was already my choice. Silence. Then she said the line that closed everything. I guess I just assumed you'd adapt. I laughed quietly. Not because it was funny, because it finally made sense. We got our drinks, exchanged a few polite words, nothing memorable. When I left, I didn't feel angry. I felt validated. Not because she apologized, she didn't. Not because she understood, she never really did. But because the question I'd carried for so long finally had an answer. I hadn't imagined it. I hadn't forgotten anything. I hadn't chosen the cage. It had simply been offered to me as a gift, wrapped in calm language, friendly witnesses, and the promise that it was better for everyone. And once I knew that for sure, walking away was easy.